Renu Rana Rana.
On this occasion I will convey the history of Amenhotep I. The son of Ahmose and Queen Ahmose Nefertiri, Amenhotep I was the second king of the 18th dynasty. He may have ascended to the throne at a relatively young age, for an elder brother had been designated as heir only about 5 years earlier. He may have even served a brief co-regency with his father, however. He evidently carried on many of the practices of his father, and his mother certainly played an important part in his reign, acting as God's wife of Ammonius. Amenhotep I may have been married to his sister, Meridamen, who was a god's wife of Ammonius, though there is apparently little documentation to substantiate this relationship. Better known is this king's daughter, Satamen, who is known both from her coffin found in one of the royal mummy caches, and from 2 statues at central and southern Karnak. Most Egyptologists assign Amenhotep I a reign of 25 or fewer years. However, it should be mentioned that on a number of his monuments at the Temple of Karnak are found various jubilee scenes. The said festival was normally celebrated after 30 years of the king's rule, but in this case the structure may have been built in anticipation of the festival. Amenhotep was this king's birth name, which means, Ammonius is pleased. He is also known as Amenhotep I, and Amenophis I by the early Greeks. His throne name was Jizr-Kari, or Holy is the Soul of Re. His Horus name was Kawafta and his 2 ladies' name was Aenur. Regardless of the ferocity of his 2 ladies' name, Amenhotep I seems to have had a fairly peaceful reign. He may have faced a Libyan uprising his first year as king, but if he did, Amenhotep I successfully overcame the ancient enemies preventing an invasion in the Delta area. We learn from inscriptions provided by Ahmose son of Abana, with verification from Ahmose Penekbet, that Amenhotep I also led a military expedition into Kush in about year 8 of his reign past the second cataract of the Nile, and apparently after his victory, brought captives back to Thebes. However, this appears to have been little more than a skirmish. He appointed a man named Turi as viceroy of Kush, and established a temple marking Egypt's southern boundary at the Nubian down of Sai. Because of perhaps a dozen years of peaceful rule during Amenhotep I's reign, his accomplishments included elaborate building work. Amenhotep I repaired and restored many ancient temples along the Nile. We find evidence of his work in Upper Egyptian sites such as Elephantine, Kam-Ombo, Abydos and the Temple of Nekbet, but he seems to have done little building work in Lower Egypt. Many of the sites where Amenhotep I built had also seen activity by his father, and at Abydos, for example, he erected a chapel commemorating Ahmose. But the building projects Amenhotep I is best known for were at the Temple of Karnak in Thebes, where he utilized different types of stone including alabaster from Hatnub and sandstone from the quarries of Gebel el-Silsila. Amenhotep I was responsible for a large, limestone gateway at Karnak that has now been reconstructed. It was decorated with Jubilee Festival decorations. The gate may have at one time been the main south entrance that was later replaced by the 7th pylon. He also had a bark shrine built for the god Ammonius that was probably erected in the west front court of the temple. Later, Amenhotep III would use some of his predecessors' work at Karnak as fill for his 3rd pylon, including a sacred bark chapel of the finest alabaster and a limestone copy of the White Chapel of Senusret I. Interestingly, many of Amenhotep I's relief carvings on the limestone monuments at Karnak are so much of a conscious emulation of Senusret I's artists that it has been difficult for archaeologists to determine to whom they should be assigned. Apparently, his building works were caused him to also restore the mines at Serabit el-Khatam in the Sinai, where he also expanded the Middle Kingdom Temple of Hathor. It would seem that by the end of Amenhotep I's reign, the main characteristics of the 18th dynasty have been established, including a clear devotion to the cult of Ammonius at Karnak, its successive military conquests in Nubia and its closed royal family with a developing administrative organization drawn from powerful families and collateral relatives. Amenhotep I was given the rare honor of being declared a titular god upon his death by the priests. He was regarded as the patron god of the Theban necropolis, alongside his mother, Ahmose Nefertiri, whose posthumous renown probably exceeded that of her son. In fact, her name appears in the litany of Amenhotep I's own cult. Amenhotep I and his mother were especially worshipped at Deir el-Medina on the west bank at Thebes, where the craftsmen and who built and decorated the royal tombs lived. In fact, this community was probably either established in his or his father's reign. Purait, the third month in ancient Egypt, was devoted to and named after Amenhotep I, and several rituals dramatizing his death, burial and resurrection took place at Deir el-Medina during the month of Purait. However, Amenhotep I became a fairly major deity with a number of festivals throughout the year. The king and his mother's cult remained strong, particularly at Deir el-Medina, throughout the New Kingdom. However, most houses during the Ramesside era contained, in their front rooms, a scene honoring the two. They were usually depicted with black or blue skin, the colors of resurrection, and so were associated with that religious element. He was probably the first pharaoh to build his tomb some distance from his mortuary temple, a practice that would be emulated by his successors. While the mortuary temple itself has been located, his tomb remains a mystery. Some Egyptologists believe it to be an uninscribed tomb at Dra Abu el-Naga, outside of the Valley of the Kings, while others believe it might be KV 39 within the valley proper. While we have not established its location, an inspection report on the tomb in year 16 of Ramesses IX's rule reported the tomb to be intact at that time. His mummy, along with his father's and a number of others, was found in excellent condition in the Royal Mummy Cache of 1881. Some information appears to indicate that Amenhotep I's son died in infancy, while other resources tell us he died childless. At any rate, his military commander, Thutmoses, who was married to the king's sister, Princess Ahmose, assumed the throne upon Amenhotep I's death. There is even a possibility that Thutmoses I was a grandson of Ahmose, the father of Amenhotep I. He may have even served as a co-regent prior to Amenhotep I's death. It should be noted that Papyrus Ebers, which dates from Amenhotep I's rule and is now in the Leipzig Museum, is one of our main sources of evidence on ancient Egyptian medicine. Also, the existence of a festival calendar recorded on this papyrus, along with other evidence suggesting an increased interest in astronomical observations, suggests that Amenhotep I may possibly have wished to rework earlier calendars. That's the history that I can convey this time. I hope it's useful. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe.